This is unprompted. Okay.
I'd love to know more about the sort of podcast, the journey you've been on for the podcast. Obviously, Steph's told me a little bit about it, but just love to hear it from your voice. how it's going. Is it a passion project? Is it a labor of love? What is it?
So it's a bit of both. I'm very much someone that does a lot of different hobbies and sometimes don't follow through. But this has become, so at work, I use a lot of AI at work. And obviously I don't know if your LinkedIn's the same as mine, but everything was just AI, just constantly throwing it down your throat. And so I want to be at the forefront of my industry. I want to be like a great creative. I'm obviously delving deep into it to just understand it and see what you can create with it. But it sort of hit me at one of the days I was just counting up the price of two products. And I was like, oh, ChatGPT, can you add these two up for me? And it was kind of at that point, I was like, hang on a minute, what are you doing? You can do that math in your head. If you're like outsourcing that thinking to AI, how much are you outsourcing your creativity? So it sort of became this sort of internal conversation around like how much I'm using AI. Am I losing my ability to think for myself creatively? It was basically an idea to reach out to great creatives and see if they're going through the same thing. So what started as it was a low barrier for entry. I did like a Q&A, which I'd send off to the best creatives in my network on LinkedIn. And it just sort of took off from there. Like found that talking and reaching out to people online, everyone's so nice. Everyone's willing to help and talk. And I think a lot of people found some value in the conversation. And so from then on, I've taken it to video. And if nothing else, it's one, keeping me self-aware of like the AI and how much I'm creatively thinking myself. I think having that constant thought of, am I using it too much, is actually keeping me in check. And then also it's just opening so many doors, and I'm chatting to loads of amazing creatives. Yeah. So that's where it's at the moment.
Nice, mate. Congrats. It's a lot to have as a hobby. It's a commitment, isn't it? To like continuously not just research and do the interviews, but the outreach and everything else that goes along with it, on top of the full-time job on top of that,
Yeah.
So like hats off to you, because it is impressive just to have that sheer level of commitment. And as you said, it probably is opening a lot of doors. I'm sure we'll get into it, but just this general idea of making friends before working together is like such a secret. Well, it's not even a secret sauce, but it's so effective. And a podcast is sort of like a great way of doing that. So do you see the audience as being creative people in the marketing sector? Is that what you say?
Not necessarily. It originally started with a good friend of mine who's a creative director who now runs his own AI studio, ironically. I was basically talking to him along with my writer partner, and he was like, oh, I'll be your first one. But then it's definitely not marketing only. Like my second person was a singer who's a friend of mine, and I'd love for it not to just be in marketing, but it's a lot easier for me to get marketing people.
Yeah. So it's creative more as a whole.
I think what it's sort of become is, I want to understand how these great creatives like yourself, like how their brain works. Because I know mine, I'm trying to figure out how mine works still. But I just think that's such a fascinating topic, learning how your brain works and like as a creative, how you think creatively.
Sure. Let's get into it.
Should we dive in? We start off with talking about something that's inherently offline or started offline.
Okay.
So do you have something potentially you could talk about?
Yeah. I mean, the artwork is inherently online because it's digital art, or there's a phone involved in some forms. But for me, to be experienced in person, and there's that offline part of it is like actual human beings in a human space interacting with this artwork. So if that fits, then I'll obviously lead with that.
Absolutely perfect. Yeah.
I generally would like to talk about my artwork as a whole. The reason that I'm making it is because I feel it's really hard out there. The world is very complicated. It feels as if we're all very disconnected, and there's lots of statistics that are worrying. But I don't want to dive too much into, I guess, all the problems in the world, because there probably isn't enough time to do that. But generally, I see the artwork as an opportunity for people to connect. Escape's probably the wrong word, but just generally come back to reality feeling lighter than when they left, if they come and experience the artwork. And I'm sure we'll get into the details of perhaps one or two bits of artwork, but as a whole, that's sort of my mission, as it were, to get people together in spaces to experience these things. And I'm making singular artworks, installations at the moment, but they're all, in my mind, experiments to ladder up to building a physical, permanent space that, a whole world that you could enter, a world of wonder.
And so, like, what kind of message are you wanting to send out to people with your artwork?
It's generally that the themes are around hope. There's usually a moment of wonder involved. It feels like online, using the word wonder again and again and again, just to sort of drill that point home. But it's ultimately a feel-good feeling, right? I want you to come either by yourself or with a loved one or a whole group of friends, experience this artwork. Hopefully it's something you won't have experienced anything like before. I'm hoping to work to bigger and bigger scale, which helps with that element of wonder. But ultimately, it's a happiness. I hope you are hopeful that tomorrow can be better today. It's just about creating new memories, and the artwork is basically the space for you to then go and create a new memory, I guess.
A lot of your work, it's about how it makes them feel. There's so much bad press out there. I'm kind of wondering, where does your process start in that?
The process of coming up with an artwork, the formula is very similar, although the output is very, very different. It's always starting with, what emotion do I want to evoke? Okay, I've talked about hope and wonder and happiness, and it's quite lofty. This one is about empathy. But in some cases, there's an artwork that I'm working on at the moment that's actually about loss and how everything lasts forever and how that's okay. But although that seems sad on the surface, it's ultimately about emotional connection, being grateful for what you've got, and then, going home and giving a loved one an extra squeeze, but, a harder squeeze than you usually would. So even that has got a sort of a happy ending to it as well. But all of those pieces all start with, what emotion is it that I want to get across? And I'm coming up with that. The answer to that question is, I'm writing things down in my notes, just as and when they come. But then the formula follows that, then how do I tell a story in which that emotion is evoked? Because the story is ultimately what makes an experience unforgettable. Or if I want you to feel that emotion by putting it into a story, that's how you feel emotion. Whether you're putting yourself in that story and connecting to the character, or actually you are the character in the story and therefore feeling that emotion firsthand. And then the tech kind of comes third. It's well, how do I get that story? How do I package that story up in a way that has a moment of wonder, or is interactive and therefore hits harder, or it becomes an unforgettable experience? And unforgettable, although it's, again, a broad term, novelty is a huge part of that. So experiencing things, like having an experience where you hold your phone up to something and it does something that it shouldn't do, defies gravity or whatever, that helps become an unforgettable experience. So the tech the tech part of it comes last, but it always starts with the emotion.
Yeah. You obviously didn't start in AR. You're a Stoke artist, right?
Yeah.
Which I'm also fascinated by. So why AR?
First of all, thank you for doing your research. Yeah, I was a street artist in Stoke, sort of as a teenager at uni. But the journey from street artist to augmented reality, it's not a linear path. There was basically, when I moved to Manchester and I wanted to be an artist full time, having a style that was very uniquely, easily identifiable as a Doddz piece of work was super important. So when I was doing the street art, nobody knew that it was me, and therefore the who is he and how is he getting away with it became as big as whatever the art was, which then inadvertently taught me the lesson about personal branding, and who the artist is as important as the art. So personal branding has always been part of that journey, and a unique style is a very big part of that, obviously.
Of course.
So I also, I think, appreciated that I was never going to be the best street artist in the world, because there's far more talented people than me out there. So trying to then go on a journey of testing and experimenting, and generally following a natural curiosity of experimenting with different things. It wasn't necessarily tech. There was sculpture, oil on canvas, poetry. I think I tried magic at one point, just lots of creative outlets. And I was painting custom denim jackets, was the latest test, and saw an Instagram ad for a very basic version of augmented reality that was actually just using 2D assets, like pictures and videos. And I'd already done some videography work. That was actually my job at the time. So it wasn't a huge leap. over into like 3D and tech and all of that sort of stuff. So did that on the back of a jacket. You held your phone up to the jacket and, you know, it came to life. And the reaction from that was significant. And I really enjoyed that combination of physical elements with a sort of doing something that it shouldn't. So the AR was just the latest test, basically. And I just haven't, I guess, stopped testing, but it tends to come back to augmented reality most of the time.
Yeah, I think there's a lesson there. If you're ever stuck creative, just keep trying different things until you find something that you really enjoy.
Honestly say in terms of like just coming up with a good idea in general, it's good to have other experiences. So like going out and learning about sculpture taught me a lot when it came to like working with 3D. Even magic taught me a little bit about storytelling, but just generally being able to piece these. If you're going on Pinterest and finding all your inspiration from Pinterest and nowhere else, then your stuff's gonna look like everybody else's stuff who's doing that same sort of thing. But if you can combine different experiences, typically that's how you'll come up with a different idea. And the jackets are a good example of that, like fashion and tech. Most of that AR experiences at the time were front-facing selfie experiences, like the dog tongue Snapchat type thing. So just coming at it from a totally different angle was able to carve like a niche, you know, and kind of to go back to that point about not being the best street artist in the world, kind of getting to the point where you're one of the top AR creators in the world quite quickly. I was allowed to do that because I was just coming at it from a totally different space.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I've literally not seen before. But well, I've seen AR obviously, but not in the way that you're implementing it. So it's fascinating to me, and I'm gonna delve into research about it, especially after going on your website. And I love that portal.
Yeah, that's
the little
new.
video game.
Yeah, that's new. That's a good example of trying to build the brand side of things of like, okay, I'm not an artist who's putting out singular pieces of work. There's a mission, there's a world that I'm building and all the artwork's connected. So like outside of the artwork, every other touch point that you might have with me has to reflect that same energy and feeling of like unforgettable experience, totally doing something different. So that is actually kind of like the first foray into, for anybody who doesn't, just for context, if you go on my website, you can go into a digital world and run around and explore, and all the artwork's in there. And there's giraffes and all sorts of random stuff in there.
But very cool.
That's my first sort of visualizing of the world that I'm building. So that was a 2-month project with a super talented developer who I was just like describing things to, and then he was having to put it into actual sort of pixels and stuff. So I really enjoyed that. And I just like running around and sort of just exploring.
It is great. And I think it's like, it might be every kid's dream to be in their own video games, and you're actually kind of living that. So it's kind of cool. Yeah. You mentioned, I think, was it Walt Disney? You mentioned that the touch points and how every different touch point needs to be elevated creatively.
Yeah.
Does Disney have a lot of influence on you?
Yeah. So I had my manager Jack. He joined like 2 years ago. We had a meeting where we were sat in a boardroom, and we were trying to do a strategy, and he was trying to get out of me exactly what it is that I want out of my artwork. And the only way that I could describe it is that I want to create the same feeling that you get. I don't know if you've been to Disneyland. In fact, you said you've just been to Japan. I don't know if you've managed to go to the Disney.
I did Universal. But
that's okay. But it's a similar thing like with Universal. It's with Disney. When you walk into Main Street for the first time and you see the castle, and you get this feeling of, the only way you can really describe it is like wonder, excitement of like what adventure am I about to go on now? What experiences am I about to have? That's the same feeling that I want to create with the artwork and ultimately a physical place. So from the pure fundamentals, that's an inspiration to me. But I guess his ability to storytell and I guess think from first principles and all that sort of stuff is, I'd be hard pressed to say that it's not an inspiration of mine.
And do you think, sort of last question on the sort of analog stuff, do you think your relationship with art has changed over time from your sort of street artist days to right now?
Yes and no. No, in the fact that the point for the street art was to shine a positive light on the Stoke-on-Trent area, but also if you didn't like your job and you were having a crap day, the point of the art was to make you smile when you were walking home from work or driving home from work. So even at 18, 19, whatever it was, that is still basically the same thing that I'm doing now, which is if you're having a hard time, this is supposed to make you feel better. I'd like to think it's a little bit more polished or premium perhaps than the teenage days, but that's there. But in terms of my appreciation, just I guess just more of like having, 10, 12 years more life experience, or it gives you just a natural appreciation for other artists and the creative work that they're doing. So yes, it has given me a newfound appreciation from art. And I'm also sort of venturing into the fine art world, which is a grey area of it, difficult to understand on its own. So as I'm venturing a bit more into there, then I'm getting a better understanding and again appreciation for museums and galleries and fine artists of the world.
For sure, I can see your art pieces in museums already. So you're already there. So sort of a bit more about how you think. I'm interested in how you set yourself up to do your best thinking.
Yeah. Best creative thinking is, and you'll know this just as another creative, is you can't just like sit down and just like lay a golden egg. Like these things take time. Do you know what I mean? So there's a process that I go through in terms of coming up with ideas, and then there's a little bit after that I perhaps can talk about as like actual thinking that I find quite interesting. But in terms of coming up with a creative idea, generally I'm always making notes. Like if I'm seeing something or something, I just have an idea, I'll write it down. I've got a long list of just like random sentences that don't make a lot of sense a lot of the time. But then I can piece those two together, 2 ideas or 3 bits together at different points. So when I sit down to then come up with an idea, I'm perhaps not starting from zero, but I go through the notes and be like, oh, so for example, the bit that I was talking about, which is about loss and accepting the fact that this, I guess, actually is a good example and conveniently the most recent one, so it's top of memory. But I've wanted to do a piece of art with a Fabergé egg for a really long time because I just think that's cool. Like people don't see Fabergé eggs very often, and if you held your phone up to one, they kind of have like a mystical, magical component to them. So like Fabergé egg has probably been on the radar for about 2 years. Then we had an artwork potential for a luxury car show event where I was going to make a Phoenix, totally unrelated. Like 9 months later, it was going to be an animatronic Phoenix, but it was way too expensive. And it was going to regenerate, and it was about daydreaming and all this sort of stuff. And then, but because that didn't work, so that probably got shelved maybe 9 months ago. And then now I'm coming back to the Fabergé egg. I was going through the sort of Rolodex of ideas, and the Phoenix was there, and I was like, oh. Then I was going from the wanting to do a piece on loss, and I was like, well, a piece with a Phoenix, which obviously like bursts into flames and ultimately you have for a period of time and then lose. Like you can see the trail of thought there. I'm like, okay, we can use the Phoenix. I'm like, and I can use the egg. So you hold your phone up to the egg bursts into flames, Phoenix appears, and then there's an experience with the Phoenix, but then the Phoenix ultimately goes, and then the egg's there at the end. So it's like that's the most recent process, but you can see that's like 2 years.
Yeah.
In the works. So that's probably the most recent example. But that if it's not like just given to me on a plate because it was in my notes from 2 years ago, then and you have to think a little harder. Generally, like oversaturating my brain with just research on all different manner of creative things, and just getting to the point where I'm feeling not overwhelmed emotionally, but just like I've seen too many things, and then just passing it over to the subconscious, forgetting about it, going on a walk. It's going to be a couple of days while it just sort of marinates, but then it usually just kind of pops into your head, and you're like, you try and put 2 pieces together. And I'm sure there's different examples of that, but that's sort of the creative process. It's kind of coming to me ad hoc, I would say.
Yeah. As many creatives, you're not alone in that. So is that egg piece, is that in the works, or is it?
So I'm working with a friend of mine who's a developer to just help me. I'm trying to put more artwork out, so he's helping me with some of the more technical sides. But yes, that is probably in the next few weeks going to finish that up, which is nice.
I'll look out for that. So this is probably an easy one because I can probably answer it in my head, but how do you avoid getting repetitive in your thinking? I'm assuming because as an artist, you can't really put out the same piece of work twice. So
yeah. I think naturally creators, the enjoyment comes from the journey of making the piece, right? So once you've done that, and I know a lot of artists then get sort of stuck in I have to do oil on canvas or I have to do murals. But even then there's like variations of what you can do that could kind of keep it interesting. But you'll see time and time again, artists, they have periods in their life when they're doing this, and then they sort of wash their hands of it and move on to something new. And that's kind of where they're getting their creative. So the answer is kind of just like natural boredom of repetitiveness, and sort of the quest for something to follow your curiosity. But in terms of the lucky thing that I have is generally just being a nerd and interested in the tech space, is that the tech is moving along so quickly, which then upskills me as well, if there's like, say, using Claude to help me code has just opened up a whole bunch of creative opportunities for me. But as the tech gets better, so even let me think of an example. There's a piece called the pollution piano, which is you hold your phone up to a physical piano, I appear at the keys, and the music that you hear is AI generated, but it changes based on the air quality in that location. So like that was an idea from maybe 2 years ago, and has only just been finished last week because I was trying to do object tracking for like a year and trying to figure out different ways of doing it, and ultimately got to a point where the tech you were able to then do it, or I upskilled myself to a point where the tech was able to be able to do it. So some of the ideas have been Color of Conversation is another one. I came up with that, I think, New Year's Eve, maybe 3 years ago, maybe 2 years ago. I must have had a lot of good ideas 2 years ago, and I've only just sort of committed to them. But I had that idea for a long time. And I've only really, upskilled myself to be able to make that. So the ideas have always been there, but perhaps there's been literal tech boundaries making it difficult to do it. But to wrap up your point, as the tech changes, I can come back to these ideas and be like, oh, I can actually do that. In fact, I have one more example for you. I did it a few years ago. It's called The House, and it was the artwork of the exterior of a home, and it was about me and Steph, my partner, sort of falling in love and having our life together. But you held your phone up to it, and you could see inside the house from the painting. And the idea is that it would change over time, different objects, the 3D models of the people would get older, all of that sort of stuff. But at the time, the only thing that I could do was like Instagram filter, which only allowed you to put like a really, really small file size in the experience. So there's just a limit there to just how much can change over time. And the quality of those models was like super compressed and that sort of stuff. Whereas now, because I've gotten better and the tech's gotten better, and I can host it on web rather than on Instagram, I can just like pull models to infinity and like have much higher quality models because they can be compressed in a different way. I can have AI generate the textures rather than having to store them all. So like every day the clothes can change. I can have it connected to the weather. So if it's raining outside, it could be raining in the artwork. Do you know what I mean? Cool. Like we're just infinitely bettering the experience. So I'm going back to a lot of pieces that I've made and just like making them better. I know that's kind of a tangent of kind of what you're asking for.
No, not at all.
When do you move on from a creative idea? I think the answer is I don't. I just keep going back to the same idea and doing it a little bit better as the tech gets better.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, you're talking about Claude and coding. I've literally just, I've been playing around with that myself. I think within the space of a couple of hours, I built like a web experience. Because on my Instagram, I'm doing this sort of thing where I learn a new skill for 1,000 hours, because 10,000 hours is too scary and not palatable.
Probably don't need that anymore.
Yeah, probably not. So I just literally talked to Claude and built a web experience where it basically tracks the hours that you're spending on a skill. But I did it within a couple of hours, and I was kind of amazed.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's cool.
What's your next skill that you're learning?
So I'm learning videography. It's kind of strange to say as an art director, but I mean, I work in B2B at the moment, and I don't get a lot of experience on sets. And as an art director, you don't really need to be able to be the one behind the camera. You just need to know like taste.
Yeah.
But
some of the more technical aspects.
Yeah, it's something that it was a skill at which, well, one, I wanted to learn a new skill, and two, it would help my career by doing it, because I'll be able to talk to people behind the camera, getting the exact vision I want. But also became sort of I just want to record and document my life a bit more.
Yeah.
So I'm learning that at the moment. But yeah.
That's a difficult one. Taste, it's not something you can put into Claude and be like, how do you define, a refined videography palette? It's probably something you're just going to have to expose yourself to a lot of that, exactly. That world, aren't you?
Yeah. And also just, it's kind of an interesting experience just being publicly not great at something. I'm always someone that if I start something new, I want to be just the best at it straight away, which can sometimes stop me from actually, learning a skill. So I'm on a journey at the moment.
Yeah,
but yeah, Claude is crazy. So yeah, I mean, you kind of already answered this. So my next question was just going to be about how technology supports your thinking. But like, do you know when you've had enough and like when to step away from the screens?
Yeah, you can definitely fit. It's more in the creative ideation pursuit where you're just like, I need to just not. It's not coming to me. I need to like step away And usually as soon as you do, I think to myself, like, I can't believe it took me an hour to realize that I needed to step away, because like I've just solved the problem in like 3 minutes by just changing the environment. But I try to not go on my phone in the evening. If you're talking about just general screen time, like I try not to get on my phone in the evenings, 'cause sleep's so important. So I lock my phone in the mornings and in the evenings, just so I'm not falling into I'm not immune to a TikTok hole, but trying my best not to fall down there. But yeah, it's more in the creative side. Like as I use it to actually make the artwork, I spend large amounts of the time in front of the computer. So it's nice to just get away and I guess have a little breather.
Yeah. Is that sorry, this is a complete side question because I keep looking at the emotions thing behind you. Is that just the one piece, or have you sold those?
No, this is just the one piece. So I've got the one screen. The plan for it now is that I would like to sell these as at-home pieces at this size, because I think the size of it is important. Obviously, the screen comes with it, but licensing bigger versions of this for events, I think is really interesting, especially events that are perhaps B2B, like you were saying. I know you work in B2B, but perhaps like the slightly more boring events that need that are interesting, because it's just about conversation, and ultimately it's a bit of social proofing that there's an interesting conversation happening here, and it's like wide mass participation. I think it could get sold licensed to a lot of events. So that's kind of what we're working on now. There's perhaps more public spaces that it could go into and have those conversations. But there's just finished this weekend like a nice personalized print that you can get, where you can, even with this piece actually, you can there's a demo site that you can go on to, and then there's a QR code, and you can record your own conversation, which is usually like a recapping of a memory, either you or between a group of people, and then it gives you that color of that conversation, and you can get that as a print. So as a core concept, it's turning conversation into color, but there's like different ways in which it can be, and that conversation that you can record overtakes this piece as well, which for like the bigger events, and then taking over the whole crowd thing, I think would be nice. So there's lots of different ways that we can present, or I'm presenting this, like, I guess, idea as a core concept.
It's cool. I asked because I want one. It's very, very cool. Yeah. So let me know when that piece comes out. Sorry, someone just
I mean, the prints are available and the physical pieces are available. They're on the website. I think Jack, my manager, is mainly focusing on licensing them for these like bigger events, just to get the sort of like spectacle of these, they have these crazy big screens, and even like set designs for public speaking, would be quite cool to have in the background. There's a few interesting conversations going on there.
I'll see if I can put you in front of some people.
Yeah, mate, I appreciate that.
So just a bit, I sort of ask all my guests, because having this conversation with AI and how people are thinking, it's young creatives, and I'm kind of interested, because being brought up in agency life when we didn't have AI, it sounds weird, I'm not even that old, but like I'm trying to get advice from each creative on like how people can sort of create their creative career on their own terms.
Yeah, sure. I think there's how to on your own terms is an interesting one. There's a few things that come to mind, like the personal branding of it all. So when I first left Stoke and I moved to Manchester, basically just messed up. Didn't know like I knew I could do street art, but like marketing, taxes, business invoices, how much do you charge, all that sort of stuff. Just didn't know any of that. So there's definitely like a business. This is a boring answer, but like the business side of things is super important and sort of foundational, really. But the personal brand, in a world of AI, like you've just said, there's an element of your actual personal brand is going to be the value. If everybody can make the same things to a certain extent and to the same level of beauty with AI, then especially as it kind of gets better and better, it's like they'll want to work with you more than they'll want to work on whatever it is that you're producing. Videography is an interesting one because there's so many videographers who are all good at in so many different ways, but having a personal relationship or with a team or an agency is going to be the thing that kind of gets you out there. And I would also say, so yeah, although it sucks, like having a social audience or at least knowing some people is super important in the business side of things. In terms of like creativity, if you can, talking about earlier, like a general curiosity can bring something different to the table, like a distinct style if it is videography. Obviously, when I first started out, there's a separate part of the business that does commercial work, which is like white labeling some of the tech out to brands. There aren't many people who do what we do. So when it comes up in a creative meeting, people think of us and then sort of reach out to the team, So if you can bring something and you've done that by, the only way you're going to do that is by just generally being curious and experimenting, then like I think it's great that you're experimenting, sort of failing in public, because there's a fear of doing that. But the failing part of it is the last point. Is I do a weekly diary where I basically just talk about things that are on my mind, and I was going to talk about failure in this one actually, but I'll do it here and save myself a job.
Yeah, sure.
I think it's important to talk about failure because I've like just failed the whole way. I've just failed forward the whole way. And I think people compare themselves on social media and see the excellent, even in my case, these are, it's coming up with cool work and it's all going well and fantastic. Like, that's not the case. It's going just as bad as it is going just as good, but half the time. And I was thinking about, even last week, I could talk about the failures from last week, from big failures in some regards. Like, we applied to be in Burning Man, and with 2 great installations. There's no reflection on Burning Man. We just didn't get selected. And it's like, they were 20 grand each, I think, for like how much we can get paid. Like, we didn't get them, which is a shame. But like, it wasn't meant to be. And even we've had some problems with the Fabergé egg not tracking, and I've got a different artwork that's an Aladdin lamp, and even the piano that wasn't tracking properly, and I spent a lot of time trying to figure that out. The pianos, which I've genuinely been working on for more than 12 months, still last week was having problems with it, to the point where it's now fixed, but we couldn't get it submitted. So these are like smaller problems that I'm having to just like figure out how to solve them. So then when I post it online, it's like seamlessly working. It's like that's really clever, but it's not just like stumbling block. The Fabergé egg only solved this morning, actually. So there's just like
Amazing.
there's just failures all the time. I think there's another piece of work on the commercial side we're supposed to go through and didn't. So there's just failure all the time, and that's just like, it's just how it is. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just not working until it works. So I think not being afraid of that, because I know, like you were saying earlier, like, it's people don't fail in public or are afraid to fail, but you just never find something interesting or something new if you're not just like experimenting and just being fine with it.
Failing forwards is a great line. I was the same. I mean, like, it's scary putting yourself out there, because everyone's afraid of being judged, but in reality, most people just don't really care.
Yeah.
As sad as that sounds.
And that is a superpower. Nobody actually cares, truthfully. Yeah. Even if people really, really care, they only really care 1% of the time. Like, they've got other stuff going on in their lives. The like negative comments online is like, you just you do just get a thick skin to those kind of things. I know when I first started and people were saying stuff like, it cut deep, and now less so. I mean, I can't imagine if like hundreds of thousands of comments were saying it would still probably cut deep. But yeah, you generally get a thick skin for that kind of thing. But yeah, you're right. It can be scary.
It helps just being a generally nice person as well.
Yeah. Well, I talk about that a lot and Steph talks to me about it a lot, actually, about just being like, you just can't outrun being a prick. You just got, like, it catches up with you. People talk, and if you're not nice, then, and it's even worse when you show that you're nice online, and then there's this big twist when
you're not nice.
You're not. If you're going to be not nice, you may as well own it.
Sure.
And that be your whole thing. Yeah, you just can't outrun being a prick.
You can't outrun being a prick.
Yeah, you can't.
Cool. So I have a couple more questions, a bit more personal for you. So you talk about one of the ones is your recent like Mac Miller film, which like you sort of mentioned it throughout, but you've made people feel like not the technology behind it, which I think can be a problem at the moment, especially in our industry, of like whether something's made with a certain tech, then they're instantly not going to like it. But with yours, it's just you get that emotion. And I'm wondering how you sort of land there.
It's well, talking about emotion really came from, again, learning. Because I was creative and not technical when I first started out, I would just talk, and because I found it super interesting that you could do this stuff, I would just talk about the tech, which it did myself over, because only really nobody cares about, nobody cares about the tech, apart from like 1% of people that you're trying to impress, that the things that they know, that type of thing. And then it wasn't really until like, I'm making artwork about these things. It's probably one of those conversations with Jack at the very beginning when he first came on board, of being like, there's more universal topics that I'm trying to touch on here. Like, first of all, nobody really knows what augmented reality is. And if they do, they probably think it's something else, VR or, AI or whatever, VFX. So I just don't talk about it anymore, because I think it's confusing. Like, people understand, scan a QR code, point phone, item, something happen. They probably don't even know that's called augmented reality. So in an attempt to try and widen the audience and sort of cross over into the mainstream, as it were, out of the tech sort of bubble, I just lead by talking about emotion. I don't think I say augmented reality. I don't just work with AR, most of it is, but I don't think I say it anywhere on I think, certainly not in any bios or anything like that. So I just am leading with emotion. So, but in that pipeline of coming up with the ideas, because I'm starting with that, I'm like, the Mac Miller one is more of a passion project. I just like, that's emotional for me, but everything else is like rooted in the idea. The tech is the afterthought, so it could have been in any shape or form. And I think most people probably go like, with Claude, now I can do X. So what can I do it with? Oh, I can do this. And therefore, like, the idea is more of a tech demo than it is an art piece. But if you're leading with, so there's a piece that I'm working on called Imaginarium, where the tech is actually super interesting in the fact that you can color in something on a piece of paper. It's a giraffe, hence the giraffes on the website. And then you take a photo of it and it appears on an installation alive, like it's it's a 3D model and it's walking around, but it's your giraffe that you drew. So like that's that's technically unbelievable feat from my point of view, because I didn't know it took a long time to get there. But really what that is, it's like, I'm obviously not talking about the tech publicly. It's actually you and a loved one doing something analog, creating something, and then the moment of wonder when your 2D item becomes 3D and alive and animated. So that idea came from the unforgettable memories. How do you, if somebody's an experience, like what's an interactive thing that perhaps is easier to do than being on a phone? There's that core emotion of how do you give the tools to somebody to make their own memory, and then the story and the tech are sort of afterthoughts, rather than, you can imagine a version there where it's, I can do this thing from image to item, perhaps would have been, even if it's a similar idea like giraffe, it probably would have been presented in a way that's less focused on that first moment of joy and the reaction, and more on like the tech or how many blades of grass are in there and that sort of stuff, So yeah, so it's not losing sight of what that core emotion was, I guess.
That's fascinating. Leading with the emotion. That's important. Very cool. And I'm very intrigued as to how that works, because that's kind of blown my mind a little bit. How
honestly, I feel like I've come at things in a wrong way, in the fact that like I spent all of last year trying to figure out how to do object detection on my own web-based experiences, because that isn't an offer that's out there. Like that tech doesn't exist. So now when I'm coming at stuff, that was really hard as well. And there's I found lots of ways of not doing it very well. So now coming back and being like, okay, let's pause that and just create artwork and get stuff out there. This stuff that I know is possible is actually kind of like, I mean, there's bumps along the road, but generally plain sailing, because I'm like, I know you can do this stuff. It's not the pursuit of like trying to create new tech. It's like using tech that's already out there. And just building my artwork, building the tech and then building my artwork around it. So it's honestly an enjoyable process for me at the moment of just like making stuff I know I can actually make.
Yeah, it's crazy. It would blow my mind a little bit. I can't even comprehend how that even works. But very, very cool. So sort of lastly, is Doddz your actual name? I know you sort of built a brand around defying the odds. Is that where that comes from?
Yeah, that's where that came from. My name's Andrew Evans, but no one else called me that for a super long time. Doddz was like the street art name. Defy the odds was the message against, like, speaks for itself. But I also had a teacher when I was at college called Ian Doddz, who was kind of the first person who showed me that you can make money through being creative, or like just enjoy your work. So he taught me a lot of. He was actually the IT technician and then became a teacher later, but he just was an early inspiration of mine. So it's kind of a little ode to that. It's a little ode to Defy the Odds. Now it's just go by Doddz.
How do you live by defying the odds in your day-to-day life?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I would say that being a full-time artist is defying the odds in some regards, and I don't lose sight of the fact of how grateful I am that I haven't had a job what you would consider a full-time job in a long time. It's not for everybody, but I just wanted to pursue being an artist, and I've wanted that since I was 15. So I daily am grateful. I know it's difficult and you easily lose sight of that, but just have a lot of gratitude that I'm creating stuff that's coming out of my brain and putting it out there, and people are connecting with it emotionally and having a positive experience. Is, I would say, defying the odds, living the dream probably is in that bracket somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of knew the answer to that already. You are living that, but still, I thought it would be interesting to ask you.
No, I appreciate it. You
I
got
could
me on my toes.
I could sort of ask you for hours about AI, and I might actually message you afterwards. But I mean, for today, that's pretty much all I have. I really appreciate you coming on.
No, of
Very cool
course.
guy. Very cool guy and cool work. So
No,
I'm
I,
sure I'll
I
be in touch.
Yeah, by all means, reach out. So I think trying to speak to more creative people, about what I'm doing, and hoping it resonates with stuff. So I appreciate you having me on. Truly,
Yeah, keep doing what you're doing. It's very. I'm a fan now, and I'm gonna look at getting one of those.
Go one fan at a time. That's what we're building. I love that.
It means I'm gonna share your work with lots of people. So hopefully
It's
that leads to
working.
more work for you for sure.
Absolutely.